Military veterans of Reddit. What are your best stories from boot camp or basic training? Story 1. One time, this guy decided that he would test out his newly learned stealth skills by leopard crawling up to a roo, a massive eastern gray male who was ripped as fuck. He was from the city and had never really seen kangaroos outside of zoos. He learned fast. The Secco, section commander, was in stitches whilst pulling the roo off of him. Male kangaroos fight like boxers. Their hind legs are huge and powerful, but so are their arm-like front legs. Both are equipped with large claws. When fighting, roos will rear up on their back legs and start punching and kicking the other roo in the face, chest, and gut, just like humans do. Their special attack is to use the tail as a spring and strike with all four limbs at once. Their fighting skills are legendary, and they're smart too. If surrounded by dogs or dingoes, for example, the roo will put its back against a tree, particularly the big buttress roots, and just kick anything that approaches in the face. If there's water nearby, the roo will wade in waist deep, and if followed by a dog, will grab it and hold it underwater until it drowns. This roo was most likely just beating the living shit out of this unfortunate digger-to-be, and it was most likely hilarious. Story 2. There are so many stories to choose from. One of the funniest is who we had to salute. Every living being, literally. So I'm walking back from a medical appointment I had when a squirrel crosses my path. So I render a snappy salute and bark out a "Good morning, sir," just as an officer is walking across the street from me. He ran across the street to investigate just who the hell I was saluting. I responded, "The squirrel, sir." He said, "What the f***? You saluted a squirrel?" "Yes, sir." "Who's your company, Commander?" "Petty Officer Shanks, sir." "Okay, move on, dumbass, and stop saluting squirrels." "Yes, sir." Story 3. The first couple of weeks of boot are full of medical and dental exams, and if you need a procedure, you get it done right there. Tons of guys had their wisdom teeth pulled, and we had one guy come back right before lights out with his mouth full of gauze and loopy from the drugs. Our DI called us all to the center of the room, formed us up, and then told us to sit Indian style on the floor, and that recruit Toothy was going to tell us a bedtime story. He pulled up a chair for Toothy, and then told him to tell us the story of the Battle of the Monitor and Merrimack. Toothy mumbled that he didn't know the story, so the DI told him to just make it up, and for every fact that he got right, we'd get to sleep an extra 5 minutes in the morning. What followed was like a live episode of Drunk History, minus any factual accuracy. As best as Toothy could recall, the Monitor was British, the Merrimack was Old Ironsides, and that in the end, they shot the shit out of each other and everybody died. The end. We were all dying laughing, but the DI sat there stone-faced. After Toothy was done, DI just stood up and said, "That is exactly how it happened. Well done." Got up, turned off the lights, and walked out. Story 4. In the barracks where I did my basics, we had cubicles. Our bunks were separated by a half wall. My bed and the bed of the troop next to me were both against that half wall. Part of our layout for inspection was a specific set of gear on the bed. One morning inspection, our platoon sergeant decided that the bed layout of the troop next to me was utter shit. So the sergeant flipped the mattress so hard it landed on my bunk, covering my layout. So after the sergeant finished reaming out the troop next to me, he takes one look at my bunk and starts reaming me out because apparently I think I'm special and deserve 2 mattresses. FYI, they have scheduled harassment periods, scheduled smokings, etc. Even when you don't anything up, they find something or make something up just to smoke you. It's part of the process of making you accept that is out of your control and dealing with things you don't enjoy. Story 5. One of the guys fell asleep during Firewatch. One of the drill instructors ambushed him and told him that he was now dead. So then he had to go around being a spooky ghost. So he has to walk around with a sheet over his head, booing and shaking everyone's racks. It would have been hilarious if I wasn't so damn tired. Story 6. I had the pleasure of witnessing this one myself. At the end of the chow line, the MTIs have a table called the Snake Pit. The MTIs randomly pull out trainees and question them on stuff we're supposed to know. One day, they pulled out one poor sap from our brother's flight. It went roughly as follows. TI. Trainee, what is the insignia of the full colonel? Trainee. The insignia of the colonel is the bird, sir. TI. What type of bird exactly? Trainee. Permission to adjust, sir? TI. Adjust. Trainee then proceeds to set his tray on their table, puts his hand up in the Egyptian pose but with both hands outward, turns his head to the side and says, "Like this, sir." The onlooking TIs nearly choked on their food while the questioning TI stared at him dumbfoundedly for a few moments before yelling at him to get his shit off of their table and get the f*** out of their sight. Oh, that was probably one of the best times I've seen a TI at a loss for words. Story 7. Brother wasn't basic and doesn't Reddit. He was in the chow hall and witnessed a TI, authority figure, call out someone who had placed their flashlight in their belt. I guess you're not supposed to do that. So the TI lights him up. Is that where you keep your f***ing flashlight? Is it a f***ing lightsaber, Luke? He made him stand at the end of 2 cafeteria lines, holding his flashlight like a lightsaber and striking dead the airmen that were leaving the 2 lines. At one point, there was a lull in traffic and the TI screams, "Oh, so f***ing lightsabers don't make noise when they're motionless?" So the old buddy has to make the bzzz noise as he waits for his next victim. Story 8. When I was in boot camp, there was one evening near the end when the only drill instructor present at the time had to run to see the first sergeant for some reason, forcing him to leave us alone for a few minutes. Normally, he would have gotten a drill instructor from a nearby squad bay to f*** with us the whole time, but it was almost over and he was the junior DI and not really into games. So he simply said, "Just don't run around screaming naked." He wasn't gone for 30 seconds before 3 recruits were galloping around screaming. Looking back, it was highly indicative of how the next 5 years of my life would be. Edit. I get it, I used poor punctuation. I swiped the whole thing on my phone while laying in bed. Besides, you don't have to read out loud, you sarcastic jerks. And no, I'm not going to correct it. I own my mistakes. Story 9. Had an evening near the end of my time in basic where there were no DI available to watch us. The only one was on CQ duty, which meant that while he couldn't watch us, he could hear us through the exceptionally sensitive address system. He warned us that if we misbehaved during our unsupervised time, it would be the doom of us all. So after he left for the evening, we folded our clothes, shined our boots, then 60 guys sat on the floor next to our beds and didn't even breathe loud. After about an hour of this, the address system snapped on. "It's your last week of training. Have a conversation." Story 10. I'm an Army vet. One morning in basic training, it was about midway through our 3-month cycle, and we were lined up for breakfast chow. While waiting in line, we had to stand at parade rest in columns of 2 in our PT uniform. We couldn't move or anything at the risk of being pointed out and screamed at. The uniform consisted of somewhat black short shorts and a gray t-shirt that said Army on the front. Well, 3 guys in front of me had one of those no-reason banners, and the drill sergeant caught him as he was trying to move to hide it away. He pulls him off to the side and starts screaming, "What is wrong with you, private? Why are your privates saluting in the chow line?" Of course, this yelling spread to the ears of 2 other drills, and they came over as well. "Hey, Battle, come look at this. Hey, at ease that shit, private." As this was said, they noticed, and one drill sergeant bent down, face inches away from the full-masked culprit, and bellowed, "At ease. Private, you better get that shit in check." I entered the building before I could hear anything else about it. To this day, I still don't know how the drill sergeants went through that without so much as a smirk. Story 11. We had a drill sergeant make a private carry a branch everywhere she went so it would replenish all of the oxygen she was wasting. We had a guy named Fitzwater. We called him Fatswater. We weren't just calling him that because he was fat. He was. He was also a lazy piece of shit who was constantly pretending to be hurt to get out of work. Anyways, he got pissed at us one day and said, "If anyone calls me Fatswater again, I'm going to tell drill sergeant." Immediately, the drill sergeant walks in and goes, "Hey, what's up, Fatswater?" A mother of one of the other privates sent him a photo of a drill sergeant trashing a locker, with a letter saying, "Hope your drill sergeant isn't as mean as this." It turned out that it was a picture of our drill sergeant. He had posted on Facebook that ended up going viral. She was just looking up pictures of drill sergeants, and it just happened to be him. Story 12. A woman in my company was from Africa. She had a graduate degree in some science, so she was very smart. But some things were lost on her, especially figures of speech. When we were on the firing range, we were told to keep the rifle up and down range, meaning no matter what way you were facing, the end of the rifle was in the air and pointed down range. She didn't get that and swung her rifle all over the place. Everyone hit the ground. One of the drill sergeants yelled and asked her if her brain took a shit in her head. She didn't understand that either. Story 13. When I was on Paris Island, we were drilling on the parade deck, and this one recruit kept f***ing up. Our drill instructor stopped us, stalked up to the recruit, and started wearing him out. Gave him the classic DI. Screaming in both ears, spit flying, smacking him in the face with his cover. Eventually, the recruit broke down and silent tears started streaming down his face. The DI took his finger, wiped a tear from the recruit's eye, and licked it, telling the recruit, "Now I own your soul." Intense. Story 14. A cousin of mine was going through training for the Royal Australian Navy. They have leader cadets amongst their ranks, whom you must refer to as leader and not sir. One of these leaders was prowling about and asked my cousin if he was all sorted out. "Yes, sir," my cousin said in reflex. "What the did you just say, cadet?" 20 push-ups right now. My cousin, you should know, is a massive stirrer. Couldn't help himself. "Yes, sir," he says, getting down to do the push-ups. 50 push-ups, the leader barks. The way he told me the story, the timing was just perfect. "Yes, sir." So he had to do 100 push-ups. His arms gave out around 70 apparently. Later on, they were doing open water survival training, floating about in a blow-up raft in the middle of the ocean. The leaders, who were submerged below the raft in scuba gear, would occasionally leap up and drag a cadet into the water to simulate being knocked overboard by a wave. Sure enough, the leader my cousin had crossed was under the boat. He burst out like a shark, seized my cousin by his collar, and dragged him into the freezing water. Holding him down for longer than was probably necessary, the leader eventually released him. As my cousin was climbing back into the raft, shuddering from the cold, the leader asked him, "Still think you're funny, cadet?" As you can guess, the reply was, "Yes, sir." He got grabbed and pseudo-drowned again immediately. I guess he's a glutton for punishment. He passed training, by the way. Story 15. One thing that everyone must know about drill sergeants is that they are masters of wordplay. I had one who loved making bets with any soldier he could. They often were impossible to win, such as offering donuts if half the platoon scored 300 on the next PT test when the average was only about 220. But we were determined to win one of his bets before we graduated, so we took every offer he gave. One such bet he made, and I quote, "If we have no failures on our next PT test, I will personally make you all chocolate chip cookies." Eager to prove ourselves and get something other than DFAC food for a change, we quickly agreed. Lo and behold, the day after our test, he called the platoon into the bay as he grinned evilly from ear to ear. He revealed with delight that we had no failures, and that we had won the bet. "So, I guess that means I'm making you chocolate chip cookies. Get into PTs and report to the PT field in 5 mics." We looked at each other in confusion, then looked to him for clarification, but he had already disappeared. We formed up on the PT field, which was a massive pit filled with rubber chips. DS walks outside, still devilishly grinning, which was when we knew we had been duped. He puts us at attention and walks around the side of the building for a moment, returning, dragging a garden hose. He proceeded to spray the platoon as we stood helplessly at attention, soaking everyone from head to foot. Once everyone was soaking and miserable, we slowly crawled the PT field up and back, on our stomachs, on our backs, on our sides, getting thoroughly covered in the rubber chips. Our commander walked out and inquired what was going on. Without skipping a beat, DS replies, "Well, sir, we made a bet that if there were no PT failures, I would make them chocolate chip cookies. So now they are chocolate chip cookies." The CO stood and laughed for several minutes before calling out Top and a few other drill sergeants to enjoy the sight of 50 soaking wet privates miserably dragging themselves across the field. That was when we learned that you never ever truly win a bet with a drill sergeant. Story 16. Navy man here. Got a few great ones for everybody. Spring of 2011. Whole berthing in the shower together, singing "It's Raining Men," when the RDC, Recruit Division Commander, E4 and above, comes in and screams, "You swinging got about 20 seconds before I come in and rain my boot up your ass." Large black Navy Chief, E7, walks into our compartment one day and says he feels like making it rain. Oh, please no. Then before I could get ready, he's already dropping people on the deck and making them do intense exercises. He walks up to one recruit and asks him, "Does the chief like Hennessy or Hypnotique?" "Hennessy, chief." "Wrong, you racist. I like Jack Daniels." Then proceeds to turn up the PT on this individual. Next person. "Is chief good at basketball or football?" "Basketball." "Wrong. Chief is good at everything." Another time, we were offered ice cream for supper one Sunday. We all took the ice cream because, well, we f***ing deserved it. We knew we were going to pay for it, so I got the bright idea to put all of the wrappers on my tray. So we walk in a straight line to throw our trays away, and the RDCs are looking for any signs of ice cream. Then they come to me as I'm throwing away the wrappers. "Recruit, did you eat 60 ice cream bars?" "Yes, chief, every one of them." More if Reddit is interested. Story 17. Probably the only fun night I had in basic was about in our 3rd week. We were out in the field, doing training and staying out in the woods for a week, and one of our drill sergeants came up to us and told us he wanted us to steal the other company's guide, the flag that the company uses to identify themselves in front of formations. He equipped us with duct tape and rope and told us to give them hell. Once it became nightfall and soldiers had gone into their tents to sleep, we made our move. We snuck through the tree line and even found their night guard. We tackled them both to the ground and duct taped their mouths shut, then moved to a tree and tied them up. The search for the guide began. We went through a bunch of tents, tied in and sacking people until we finally found it. Once we got it, we ran back to our area and handed it to our drill sergeant. As a reward, on the following Sunday, he let us sleep in for 2 hours, which is a huge thing when you're always sleep deprived. Sounds like FTX, but I've never heard about FTX happening 3 weeks in, unless this event was something other than FTX. Keep in mind, I was in basic in 2003, so I don't know what may have changed between then and whenever you were in. Story 18. There was a recruit who I'll call Private P. On the first day of basic training, our company was being briefed by the battalion commander and sergeant major. Private P stood up and announced that he wanted to quit. What followed was an absolute shit show. They wouldn't let him quit, and from then on he was a target of abuse from the drill sergeants and fellow recruits. Over time, his behavior became more and more concerning. He always just stared off into space, wouldn't talk to anybody, and if anybody made fun of him or pissed him off, he'd pull out his notebook. We were all required to have one and write something in it. One day, after we had been at the rifle range to practice for qualification, we were inside the barracks conducting weapons maintenance when our senior drill sergeant told us to get the f*** outside ASAP. We were put in formation and ordered to strip down for a search shakedown. Obviously, we asked what was going on, and one of the senior drill sergeants held up a live round. Live rounds are never ever supposed to leave the range in basic training, and grabbed Private P and brought him in front of the company. He was crying, and the drill sergeant started screaming at him. We still didn't know what exactly had happened, and then the MPs came and took him away. Turns out he had smuggled 6 live rounds, and he had written in his notebook his plan to kill his 3 platoon drill sergeants, our company commander and first sergeant, and then himself. We speculated he was never going to go through with it and just wanted to get kicked out, but you never know. That was the last we saw or heard of him. Story 19. Marine Corps Boot Camp. First day out in the rifle range. The supervision out there is a little more lax, so the drill instructors can get away with a lot more. For whatever reason, my kill hat stopped me in front of where there was a washer and dryer. He yells, "Thagino, ever want to be an astronaut?" Being the good recruit I am, I yell, "Yes, sir." He responds, "Good, get in your space capsule." He immediately orders me into the dryer. I only get in halfway, and turns it on for revolution, allowing me to flip all the way around before stopping it and probably walking away to hide his laughter. Good times. Story 20. I was told to go get your handy dandy hoo-yah and put it in your giddy-up. I instantly rocketed back to my rack and sincerely for about 5 seconds was panicked looking for my hoo-yah. Even said it to myself as I was doing it. I then realized I had no hoo-yah to find. I felt like an idiot, but still was searching for my giddy-up until my brain slapped itself inside my skull and forced me to realize that was not a thing either. Self-loathing I shall never forget. All in the span of about 8 seconds. Staff Sergeant Perito, if you read this, I spent 6 years in and never got to fight a lava dragon, and never was issued a giddy-up.